The evening shadows stretched long across the Colorado Territory, as Sam Wheeler guided his weary horse toward the small trading post that marked the halfway point of his monthly supply run. The year was 1874, and the frontier settlement of Cedar Falls consisted of little more than a general store, a blacksmith shop, and a handful of weathered buildings scattered along the banks of a creek that ran strong in spring, but barely trickled by autumn's end. Sam was a man of 32 years, lean and weathered by a life spent mostly in the saddle. His face bore the deep lines that came from squinting against prairie sun and desert wind, but his gray eyes held a kindness that had served him well in his work as a freight hauler and occasional scout for wagon trains. Unlike many men on the frontier, Sam had never developed the casual hatred for Indians that seemed to infect so many settlers. He had seen too much senseless violence from both sides to believe that any one people held a monopoly on either cruelty or virtue. As he approached the trading post, Sam noticed something that made him rein in his horse and study the scene more carefully. Near the well behind the building, partially hidden by a stack of empty barrels, a small figure huddled in the gathering dusk. At first glance, it appeared to be a child, but as Sam's eyes adjusted to the dimming light, he could make out the distinctive clothing and long black hair that marked the figure as a young Apache. The boy couldn't have been more than 12 or 13 years old, and he was clearly in distress. His clothes were torn and dusty, suggesting he had been traveling hard for some time. More concerning was the way he held himself, one arm cradled against his chest in a manner that suggested injury. As Sam watched, the child's head drooped with exhaustion, and he swayed where he sat as if fighting to remain conscious. Sam's mind raced through the implications of what he was seeing. Apache raids had been increasing in frequency throughout the territory, and tensions between the military and various tribal bands had reached a dangerous peak. Just last week, a cavalry patrol had swept through the area looking for a group of Apache warriors who had supposedly attacked a supply wagon. Finding an Apache child here, alone and injured, could mean any number of things, none of them simple. The smart thing, the safe thing, would be to ride into town and report the boy's presence to the local sheriff or the nearest military post. That was what most frontier folk would do without a second thought. But as Sam looked at the small, vulnerable figure by the well, he saw not a potential threat but a child who needed help. The boy reminded him painfully of his own younger brother, who had died of fever 5 years earlier, leaving Sam with a grief that had never fully healed. Sam dismounted slowly, making sure his movements were deliberate and non-threatening as he approached the huddled figure. The boy's head snapped up at the sound of footsteps, his dark eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. Sam could see now that the child's left arm hung at an unnatural angle, clearly broken, and dried blood caked the side of his face from a cut above his eye. "Easy there, son," Sam said softly, crouching down to bring himself to the boy's eye level. He held his hands out, palms open, in the universal gesture of peaceful intention. "I'm not going to hurt you. My name is Sam." He spoke slowly and clearly, unsure how much English the child might understand. The boy watched him warily, like a cornered animal ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, but his English was clear and precise. "I am called Kitsazilicii," he said, then added after a moment's hesitation, "Red Boy, in your tongue." The formal way he introduced himself, despite his obvious pain and fear, spoke to a dignity that seemed far beyond his years. Sam nodded respectfully. "Red Boy. That's a strong name." He gestured gently toward the boy's injured arm. "That looks like it hurts pretty bad. Will you let me take a look at it?" When the child hesitated, Sam added, "I've set broken bones before, for horses and men both. I can help you." Trust came slowly, earned through patience and gentle words. Red Boy gradually allowed Sam to examine his injuries, wincing but making no sound as Sam carefully probed the broken arm. The break was clean, which was fortunate, but it needed to be set and splinted properly or the boy would carry the deformity for life. The cut on his head was superficial, but needed cleaning to prevent infection. As Sam worked, using supplies from his saddlebags to fashion a makeshift splint, Red Boy told him what had happened. His small band had been attacked by soldiers 3 days earlier while they camped near a waterhole. His grandfather, the band's leader, had been killed, along with most of the adults. Red Boy had escaped with his older sister and 2 cousins, but they had become separated during the flight through the mountains. "I look for them," Red Boy said, his young voice heavy with determination and grief. Must find family. Must warn them soldiers still come. The responsibility the boy felt for his missing relatives was evident in every word, a burden that seemed crushing for someone so young to carry alone. Sam's heart went out to the child as he finished binding the splint with strips torn from his own shirt. The boy had been wandering alone for 3 days, injured and without food, driven by loyalty to family members who might already be dead or captured. It was the kind of desperate situation that called for immediate action, regardless of the complications it might create. The trading post owner, a grizzled man named Pete Hawkins, emerged from his store as Sam was helping Red Boy to his feet. Hawkins took one look at the Apache child and his expression hardened into the suspicious scowl that had become his default reaction to any Indian presence in his territory. "What in hell are you doing, Wheeler?" Hawkins demanded, his hand moving instinctively toward the shotgun he kept behind his counter. "That's one of them murdering Apache. Could be a spy or a decoy for a war party. You should be hog-tying him and taking him to Fort Collins, not playing nursemaid." Sam positioned himself between Hawkins and the boy, his own hand resting casually on the grip of his Colt revolver. "He's just a hurt kid, Pete. Needs food and medical attention, not a rope around his neck." His voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath the quiet words that made Hawkins think twice about pushing the matter. "Kid or not, he's Apache," Hawkins insisted, though he made no move to reach for his weapon. "You know what they did to the Jameson family last month. Burned their place. Took the scalps. How do you know this one ain't part of that same bunch?" Red Boy listened to this exchange with growing alarm, understanding enough to know that his presence was creating danger for the man who had helped him. He tugged at Sam's sleeve and spoke quietly in Apache, then translated his words. "I tell you, I go now. Do not want trouble for kind man who helps Kitsizo-Lichii." But Sam had already made his decision, one that would echo through his life for years to come. "You're not going anywhere with that arm, son. And Pete," he turned to face the trading post owner directly, "this boy is under my protection. Anyone who wants to harm him will have to go through me first." The confrontation might have escalated, but it was interrupted by the arrival of Sheriff Morrison, a reasonable man who had heard raised voices and come to investigate. Morrison listened to Sam's explanation of the situation, examined Red Boy's injuries, and made a practical decision based on frontier pragmatism rather than racial prejudice. "Boy's clearly no threat to anyone in his condition," Morrison concluded. "Wheeler, if you want to take responsibility for him, that's your business. But I'm telling you official-like that if there's any trouble connected to this, it falls on your head." He paused, studying Red Boy's face. "Might be worth keeping him around anyway. Kid might have information about where his people are hiding." Sam nodded his agreement, though he had no intention of using Red Boy as a source of intelligence against his own people. As darkness fell over the small settlement, Sam made arrangements to stay the night at the trading post, purchasing supplies and medical materials to properly treat the boy's injuries. Red Boy remained close to Sam's side, clearly understanding that his safety depended entirely on this stranger's continued protection. That night, as they camped under the stars a mile outside of town, Red Boy told Sam more about his family and the life they had been living before the attack. His grandfather, Cochise Begay, had been a respected leader who tried to keep his small band away from the conflicts that were tearing the Apache nation apart. They lived quietly in the high country, hunting and gathering according to traditional ways, bothering no one and asking only to be left alone. The boy spoke with a maturity that came from experiencing loss and responsibility far too early in life. His parents had died of smallpox 2 winters earlier, leaving him in the care of his grandfather and sister. His sister, Desba, was 16 and had been promised in marriage to a young warrior from another band. Red Boy's 2 cousins were brothers, slightly older than himself, who had been learning the skills of hunters and warriors under their grandfather's guidance. "Grandfather teach me to track, to read signs in earth and sky," Red Boy said, staring into the flickering campfire. "He say Apache must remember old ways, but also learn new ways to survive. He try to make peace with white settlers, trade with them sometimes." The boy's voice grew heavy with grief. "Soldiers did not care about peace. They come with guns ready. Shoot first." Sam listened with growing understanding of the complexity of the situation facing both sides in this conflict. Men like Red Boy's grandfather were trying to find a middle path, a way for their people to survive the massive changes sweeping across their traditional lands. But fear and misunderstanding on both sides made such peaceful solutions increasingly difficult to achieve. As the night deepened, Sam found himself thinking about his own past and the choices that had brought him to this moment. He had served briefly in the territorial militia during the early Apache conflicts, but had grown disgusted with the indiscriminate violence he witnessed. Too many soldiers seemed unable to distinguish between hostile warriors and peaceful families, treating all Indians as enemies to be eliminated, rather than people with legitimate claims to the land they had inhabited for generations. "Red boy," Sam said finally, "I want you to know that you're safe with me. Tomorrow we'll start looking for your family, but we'll do it careful-like. There are soldiers and bounty hunters all through these mountains, and they're not particular about who they shoot." He paused, then added, "If we can't find your people, you'll always have a place with me. I've got a small ranch up north where you could stay, learn new skills if you want." The boy nodded solemnly, understanding the magnitude of what Sam was offering. In a world where most white men would see him as nothing more than a potential threat, this stranger was extending not just temporary help but the possibility of a permanent home and family. It was an offer that spoke to something deeper than mere kindness. It represented a bridge between two worlds that seemed increasingly at war with each other. Dawn came gray and cold, with storm clouds gathering over the distant peaks. Sam was awakened by Red Boy's urgent whisper and the sound of approaching horses. Through the morning mist, he could see riders coming up the trail, moving with the deliberate purpose of men on a military mission. Sam quickly kicked dirt over their fire and helped Red Boy into a clump of boulders where they could observe without being seen. The riders were cavalry, a full patrol of 20 men led by a captain Sam didn't recognize. They wore the dust and hard expressions of soldiers who had been in the field for days, pursuing an enemy that seemed to vanish into the landscape like smoke. As they approached the abandoned campsite, the captain called a halt and dismounted to examine the still warm ashes of Sam's fire. "Fresh camp," the captain announced to his men. "Tracks show 2 people, one adult, one smaller. Could be our Apache boy, and whoever's helping him." Captain Bradley was a professional soldier with ambitious plans for advancement, and capturing or killing fugitive Indians was exactly the kind of achievement that could earn him the promotion he craved. Sam's blood ran cold as he realized the soldiers were specifically hunting for Red Boy. Someone in Cedar Falls had reported the boy's presence, probably Pete Hawkins looking to collect any reward money that might be offered. The captain's next words confirmed Sam's worst fears. "Intelligence suggests the boy has information about Apache strongholds in the high country," Bradley continued. "Orders are to bring him in for questioning, by whatever means necessary. If he resists or tries to escape, we're authorized to use deadly force." The casual way the captain discussed potentially killing a child sent a chill through Sam that had nothing to do with the morning cold. Red Boy pressed closer to Sam, his young face tight with controlled fear. He understood enough of what was being said to know that these soldiers had not come to help him find his family. They had come to capture or kill him, seeing him not as a child in need of protection but as a source of military intelligence or a trophy to be claimed. The patrol spent nearly an hour searching the area, following tracks and examining every possible hiding place except the boulder field, where Sam and Red Boy had taken refuge. Finally, convinced that their quarry had moved on during the night, Captain Bradley ordered his men to mount up and continue their pursuit up the mountain trail. As the sound of hoofbeats faded into the distance, Sam made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Instead of continuing toward his ranch as originally planned, he would take Red Boy deeper into Apache territory, helping the boy search for his missing family while staying ahead of the military patrols. It was a dangerous plan that could easily get them both killed, but Sam couldn't bring himself to abandon a child to the mercy of soldiers who seemed to have none. For 3 days, Sam and Red Boy traveled through increasingly rugged country, following game trails and hidden paths that the boy seemed to know instinctively. Red Boy's arm was healing well in its splint, and his knowledge of the terrain proved invaluable as they avoided several military patrols and a group of civilian bounty hunters who were also searching for Apache fugitives. The boy's tracking skills were remarkable for someone so young. He could read stories in the earth that were invisible to Sam's eyes, identifying not just what animals had passed but how long ago and in what condition. More importantly, he could recognize the subtle signs left by his own people. Broken twigs arranged in specific patterns, stones placed to mark direction, scratches on tree bark that conveyed complex messages to those who knew how to interpret them. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, as they followed a narrow canyon that wound deeper into the heart of Apache country, Red Boy suddenly tensed and raised his hand for silence. His head was tilted, listening to something that Sam's less acute hearing couldn't detect. Then the boy's face lit up with the first genuine smile Sam had seen since they met. "They come," Red Boy whispered, his voice filled with excitement and relief. "My people come." At first, Sam heard nothing but the wind sighing through the canyon walls and the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. Then, gradually, he became aware of other sounds: the soft whisper of unshod hooves on stone, the faint jingle of metal ornaments, and something that might have been voices carried on the breeze. The sounds seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, as if the canyon itself was speaking. Suddenly, the narrow trail ahead was no longer empty. Apache warriors emerged from concealment with such silence and grace that they seemed to materialize from the very rock walls. Sam counted at least a dozen men, all armed and painted for war, their faces grim with the hard expressions of people who had been fighting for survival against overwhelming odds. At their head rode a man who commanded immediate attention despite his relatively small stature. He was perhaps 40 years old, with graying hair braided with silver ornaments and scars that told of many battles fought and survived. His dark eyes held the intelligence and authority of a born leader, but also a deep sadness that spoke of losses that could never be fully healed. Red Boy called out in Apache, his young voice cracking with emotion as he identified himself to the warriors. The response was immediate and dramatic. Several of the men dismounted and rushed forward, gathering the boy into embraces that spoke of relief and joy. Sam watched this reunion with growing understanding that he was witnessing something far more significant than a simple rescue. The leader of the Apache band approached Sam with cautious dignity, his hand resting on the grip of a rifle but his posture suggesting readiness for either conversation or combat. When he spoke, his English was careful but clear, with the formal precision of someone who had learned the language through necessity rather than choice. "I am called Cochise Begay," he said, fixing Sam with a direct stare. "The boy you travel with is my nephew, son of my dead brother. We have been searching for him since the soldiers attacked our camp." His voice carried the weight of absolute authority, but also a controlled grief that spoke of recent loss. Sam dismounted from his horse and stood facing the Apache leader, acutely aware that his life hung in the balance of the next few moments. "My name is Sam Wheeler," he replied respectfully. "I found your nephew injured and alone. He's a brave boy who never stopped looking for his family." Cochise Begay studied Sam's face with the intensity of a man who had learned to judge character quickly and accurately. Around them, the other warriors waited in silence, their weapons ready but not openly threatening. The tension in the air was palpable, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. Red Boy spoke rapidly in Apache, gesturing toward Sam and clearly explaining the circumstances of their meeting and the help he had received. As the boy talked, Sam noticed subtle changes in the expressions of the listening warriors. Suspicion gave way to curiosity, and then to something that might have been respect. When Red Boy finished his account, Cochise Begay was quiet for a long moment, processing what he had heard. Then he spoke again, his tone warmer but still formal. "My nephew tells me you saved his life, protected him from soldiers who would have killed him, and helped him search for his family at risk to yourself. This is not the behavior we have learned to expect from white men." Sam nodded, choosing his words carefully. "I've seen enough killing on both sides to know that war doesn't solve anything. Your nephew needed help, and I was in a position to provide it. Any decent man would have done the same." He paused, then added, "I've been searching for his missing family members, a sister and 2 cousins. The Apache leader's expression darkened. His sister Desba and 1 cousin were captured by soldiers 2 days after the attack. They are being held at Fort Collins, awaiting transport to the reservation. The other cousin—" He stopped, unable or unwilling to continue. Red Boy's face crumpled as he understood the implications of his uncle's words. One of his cousins was dead, killed either in the original attack or during the pursuit that followed. His sister and surviving cousin were prisoners, facing a fate that might be worse than death: forced relocation to a reservation, where Apache culture would slowly die under the weight of government policies designed to eliminate tribal identity. The weight of this tragedy settled over the group like a physical presence. Sam found himself thinking about the casual brutality of a conflict that seemed to have no clear objectives beyond the mutual destruction of 2 peoples who might otherwise have found ways to coexist. Men like Captain Bradley saw Apache children as military targets, while Apache warriors had learned to view all white settlers as enemies to be driven from their ancestral lands. Cochise Begay made a decision that surprised everyone, including his own warriors. Instead of taking Red Boy and departing immediately, he invited Sam to accompany them to their hidden camp in the high country. It was an unprecedented gesture of trust that spoke to the Apache leader's recognition of the debt his people owed to this unusual white man. "You have shown honor in protecting my nephew," Cochise Begay explained as they rode deeper into the mountains. "Among our people, such kindness creates obligations that must be acknowledged. You will be welcome in our camp as long as you wish to stay." He paused, then added with characteristic directness, "But you should know that by coming with us, you become an enemy to your own kind. Soldiers will shoot you on sight if they know you have lived among Apache." Sam understood the implications of what was being offered. To accept Cochise Begay's invitation would mean crossing a line from which there might be no return. He would become, in the eyes of territorial law, a renegade and an outlaw. But looking at Red Boy riding beside him, his young face still bearing the marks of recent trauma, Sam knew he couldn't simply abandon the boy to face an uncertain future alone. The Apache camp was hidden in a valley so remote and well concealed that Sam would never have found it without guidance. A small stream provided fresh water, and the surrounding cliffs offered protection from military patrols while allowing easy escape routes in multiple directions. Perhaps 30 people lived here: men, women, children, and elders who represented the remnants of what had once been a much larger band. Sam was struck by the normalcy of daily life in the camp, despite the circumstances that had brought these people together. Children played games, women tended fires and prepared food, and men worked on weapons and equipment with the casual efficiency of people following long-established routines. The presence of an armed stranger caused some initial tension, but Cochise Begay's endorsement was enough to ensure Sam's acceptance. Over the following days, Sam found himself drawn into the daily rhythms of Apache life in ways he had never expected. He helped with hunting and gathering, contributed his knowledge of local terrain and military movements, and gradually began to understand the complex social structure that governed this close-knit community. More importantly, he watched Red Boy begin to heal from the trauma of his experiences, surrounded by family members who understood his loss and shared his grief. The boy's recovery was remarkable to witness. Under the care of his uncle and the other adults in the camp, Red Boy began to regain the confidence and resilience that were natural to him. His broken arm healed cleanly, and his skills as a tracker and hunter continued to develop under expert guidance. But perhaps most importantly, he retained the capacity for trust and friendship that his encounter with Sam had helped to preserve. As autumn progressed toward winter, Sam found himself facing a decision he had never anticipated. Cochise Begay formally invited him to become a permanent member of the Apache band, offering him not just refuge but genuine adoption into the tribe. It was an honor that had been extended to very few white men, and accepting it would mean abandoning forever his former life as a freight hauler and occasional scout. The offer came with significant responsibilities and risks. As a member of the band, Sam would be expected to participate in raids against military targets and hostile settlements, activities that would make him a wanted man with a price on his head. But it also offered something he had been searching for without realizing it: a sense of belonging to a community that valued loyalty and mutual support above individual gain. The decision was complicated by disturbing news that reached the camp through Apache scouts who monitored military activities throughout the territory. Captain Bradley had been promoted to major and given command of a new campaign designed to eliminate the remaining free Apache bands through a combination of aggressive pursuit and harsh reprisals against anyone suspected of providing them aid or comfort. More personally troubling was intelligence about Red Boy's sister and cousin being held at Fort Collins. According to the scouts, Desba and her young male relative were being used as bargaining chips to try to force Cochise Begay's surrender. Major Bradley had sent word that the prisoners would be released unharmed if the Apache leader turned himself in to face trial for various alleged crimes against territorial citizens. It was an impossible choice, and everyone in the camp knew it. Cochise Begay's surrender would mean his certain death, probably after prolonged torture designed to extract information about other Apache bands. But refusing to surrender meant condemning his niece and nephew to probable death or transportation to reservations where they would face slow cultural extinction. Sam found himself uniquely positioned to potentially influence this desperate situation. As someone who could move freely in white settlements and had contacts throughout the territory, he might be able to gather intelligence about the prisoner's exact situation, or even attempt some kind of rescue operation. But such an attempt would be extremely dangerous and would require careful planning and probably help from sympathetic allies. The discussion of these possibilities took place around the council fire on a cold October night, with snow already dusting the high peaks surrounding their valley refuge. Sam listened as Cochise Begay and his advisors debated various courses of action, each more dangerous than the last. The Apache way of war favored sudden strikes and rapid withdrawal, but rescuing prisoners from a heavily fortified military post would require entirely different tactics. The plan that eventually emerged was audacious in its simplicity and terrifying in its implications for everyone involved. Sam would return to the settlements, ostensibly resuming his work as a freight hauler while actually gathering intelligence about Fort Collins and the disposition of its defenses. Meanwhile, Cochise Begay would prepare a small force of his best warriors for a rescue attempt timed to coincide with Sam's presence at the fort. Red Boy insisted on being part of the operation, arguing that his sister would trust him more readily than strangers, and that his small size would allow him to move through places where adults could not go. Despite initial resistance from the adults, his arguments eventually proved persuasive. The boy had grown considerably during his time in the camp, developing both physical skills and emotional maturity that qualified him for the dangerous mission ahead. Preparations took nearly a month, with every detail planned and rehearsed until the participants could execute their roles without conscious thought. Sam established a legitimate reason for visiting Fort Collins by arranging to deliver a load of supplies from a merchant in Denver. Cochise Begay's warriors practiced night movement and silent infiltration techniques until they could appear and disappear like ghosts in the darkness. The rescue attempt itself unfolded with the kind of precision that comes from desperate necessity and perfect preparation. Sam's presence at the fort provided the distraction needed for the Apache warriors to penetrate the outer defenses and locate the prisoners' holding area. Red Boy's small size allowed him to slip through a drainage tunnel that adults could never have navigated, reaching his sister and cousin just as the main assault began. But the operation's success came at a terrible cost. Major Bradley had anticipated some kind of rescue attempt and had positioned his men accordingly. The Apache warriors fought their way clear of the fort with their rescued people, but not without casualties. 3 men died in the fighting, including one of Cochise Begay's most trusted lieutenants, and several others were wounded seriously enough to require extended medical care. Sam's cover was blown during the fighting when he was seen helping the Apache warriors escape. By morning, he was a wanted man with a substantial bounty on his head, effectively cutting him off from any possibility of returning to his former life. But as he rode with the Apache band toward their mountain stronghold, he felt no regret about the choice he had made. The reunion between Red Boy and his sister was emotional beyond words, with tears and laughter mingling as the siblings held each other after months of separation and uncertainty. Desba had endured hardships that had aged her beyond her 16 years, but her spirit remained unbroken. Her cousin, a boy slightly older than Red Boy, had been beaten by guards but had never revealed any information about Apache camps or movements. In the weeks that followed, as winter closed around their mountain refuge, Sam found himself fully accepted into the Apache community in ways that went far beyond mere tolerance or strategic alliance. He had proven his loyalty through actions that spoke louder than any words, demonstrating a commitment to their welfare that transcended racial and cultural boundaries. Cochise Begay formally adopted him into the tribe in a ceremony that recognized him as a full member of the band, with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. But perhaps more meaningful was the quiet acceptance he received from individuals like Red Boy's sister, who saw him not as a white man who had helped Indians, but simply as family. Years later, when the Apache Wars finally ended and the survivors were forced onto reservations, Sam remained with his adopted people, helping them navigate the complex challenges of life under government supervision, while secretly maintaining connections to the traditional ways that gave their existence meaning. He never married, but he served as uncle and grandfather to multiple generations of Apache children who grew up knowing him simply as Sam, the man who had helped their uncle Red Boy find his way home. The bond that began with one white man's decision to help an injured Apache child had evolved into something far more significant, a bridge between two worlds that demonstrated the possibility of understanding and cooperation even in the midst of seemingly irreconcilable conflict. It was a legacy that would be remembered in Apache oral tradition long after the participants had passed into legend, a reminder that individual acts of kindness can sometimes reshape the course of history itself. Red Boy grew to become a respected leader in his own right, never forgetting the lessons he had learned about the possibility of friendship across racial lines. When he told stories to his own children and grandchildren, he always emphasized that Sam Wheeler had saved more than just one Apache boy's life. He had preserved the hope that people of goodwill from different cultures could find common ground based on shared humanity rather than mutual fear and hatred. The turquoise bear that Sam had received from his first Apache friend, Aishan, became a symbol passed down through generations, representing the power of compassion to bridge any divide and the truth that family bonds are created by choice and loyalty rather than blood alone.